Hello and welcome to another episode of Strange Paranormal Podcast. I'm Jason Kupsik, and
I'm Shane Coffee.
on this episode we have a found Welsh monolith, taco Rapture tips for the Eclipse, Grandpa's UFO story, retirement home ghosts, ghostly footsteps in an old building, Trinity Lutheran Hospital ghostly hand shaking experience, Shane gets grabbed, and there's a Malvern Manor personal experience with a shadow man.
Heck yeah. Mysterious monolith appears on Welsh hilltop. A mysterious monolith has suddenly appeared on a hilltop in Powys. A gleaming silver structure was spotted by walkers on Hay Bluff near the town of Hay-on-Wye on the weekend. Sprouting up out of the mud and measuring about 10 feet tall, its discovery has led many to take onto social media to question who put it there and why. Some have pondered whether or not the object could be extraterrestrial origin. Local builder Craig Muir said that he was taken aback when he spotted what he assumed to be some sort of a UFO out while hiking. It seemed to be like a very fine metallic, almost like a surgical steel, he said, describing the monolith, a large single upright block, usually made of stone. It looked perfectly leveled and steady despite the weather being windy. Since there was no way to drive up to the top of the hill, Mr. Muir suggested that it could have been taken there by a group of people or dropped into position by a helicopter. It didn't seem like it was chucked in there. Instead, it had been accurately put in the ground, he said. However, there were no obvious tracks around it, and one would think that if something like that would have been put there, would have caused a mess. This is not the very first sighting of a mysterious monolith. In November 2020, a monolith was spotted by people aboard a helicopter in the remote Utah desert in the USA before disappearing just days later. Just days after its disappearance, another monolith appeared on the Isle of Wight. Similar structures have been seen in Cornwall and a few isolated parts of Europe. Even one popped up in Glastonbury of Glastonbury Tor, an area steeped in Celtic mythology, inscribed with the words "Not Banksy" on the side. Not Banksy. In Glastonbury Tor. I butchered that name, so I apologize if you live in Glastonbury Tor. But it appears, it says "Not Banksy" on the side. That one, it's walkers discovered a large chunk of metal lying on its side on Wednesday morning, and it's believed to have been placed there overnight. So this monolith, the one in Glastonbury, was actually laying on its side instead of being just like the one that you're seeing here in the image.
Yeah.
Michelle Crowborn said, "I couldn't believe my eyes when we spotted this monolith at the National Trust site. Since it was photographed in Utah last month, similar structures have popped up around the world." And then it continues with what we'd already spoken about. But that's crazy. What do you think, Jason? I'll tell you what I'm thinking.
Go ahead.
Aliens.
Okay.
Aliens. That's all there is to it. No footprints, smooth metal all over the world. Aliens.
Well, I'm gonna go a little less conspiratorial alien side. So let's talk about this one first. If you look at the ground down here, it looks pretty rough. Like it's brush, sagebrush and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that could be you might be able to tell when that's trampled down, but just looking at this ground, I would say it would be very hard to tell if someone went walking through there, in my opinion.
It's perfectly level. I mean, that sucker looks square. I mean, it does.
Yeah.
And it's
I
tall.
do
And
know that
heavy.
the very first one in Utah that was such a big deal, that one was placed there a few years before by a photographer doing a photography shoot, and he just left it out there because he didn't want to take the time to remove it. So that came
Wonder.
out several months after all the news stories, it finally came out. They figured out exactly where that one came from. And my guess is that the rest of them after that were copycats, including this one, to be honest.
What
I
if
mean,
aliens paid him to do it?
it could be dropped from a UFO. I do know that the other one disappeared a couple of days after it was first reported, the one in Utah. And my guess is that some people just went out there and stole it because of the news. That one was believed to be hollow inside. They didn't really talk about this one, like if you knock on it or what it's, if they could tell how solid it was. Because if it's not solid, if it's hollow inside, like the other one was believed to be, I think at least two, no more than two people would be needed to carry that up that hill. If it's
If it's
hollow,
hollow,
I
yeah.
bet only one person could carry that up that hill, even though it's tall.
Yeah, fair.
Especially depending on what it's like, what the shell's made out of.
But we also don't know really how long it was there either, because it was just spotted by hikers. It could have been there for a couple weeks for all we know, but I still like to think that it was put there by aliens.
Yeah, I mean, it could be there longer. It does look like there's some weathering on it. It's not as smooth and shiny as the other ones were. The thing is,
Hey,
if this
zoom
was
back in that picture
on the monolith itself,
on the edges, do those look like they're welded? Dang it.
potentially,
Aliens don't need to weld.
there is some beading there. It's hard to tell with the. I would say that edge definitely does look welded.
As a welder,
Yeah,
I will say that edge is definitely welded. All right. Well, whatever.
Whether this was placed by aliens or not, if it was placed at the same time as the other ones and just not seen, which I think is unlikely because they said that I doubt nobody's hiked through that region in that amount of time. But
Fair.
if it was placed 4 years ago now with the other one, because I can't believe it was 4 years ago, but they haven't done anything that we know of. I mean, they could be frying our brains and we don't know.
Microwaves or antennae.
Yeah.
So I wonder what not Banksy means. Like,
So Banksy is an artist.
Oh, makes sense.
Banksy's an artist that I think they know who he is now, but he's been an anonymous artist. He would spray paint things. Sometimes I think they were social commentary, sometimes they weren't. He was famously, one of his paintings sold at an auction for millions of dollars, and he had built the frame to shred it as soon as it was sold. And then it was worth even more because people love the fact that he did that. So that one clearly is art. I don't think aliens are stamping not Banksy on the side of their monoliths. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. It would be cool to find something like this. I just think the first one was a forgotten about art photography installation that was found, and the rest of them are copycats.
Yeah, unfortunately, as much as I want to say aliens, because I did say aliens, yeah, I remember Banksy now. I remember that whole ordeal, and I'll give this one up to you. But next time, I'm going to have one that's going to be aliens.
All right.
You see.
Rapture believer demands return of $1,000 in tips at Florida taco restaurant. A woman who left over $1,000 in tips at a Florida taco restaurant because she thought she was going to be swept up in the biblical rapture on the day of the eclipse now wants a rapture refund, claiming the restaurant defrauded her. A server at the restaurant said on Reddit that the woman was nice but kept trying to proselytize to me. Her bill came to $40. to which she added a $300 tip and wrote on the receipt, in case you don't rise on the 8th. The woman returned a few days later and tipped another server $777, which is a biblical number. When the rapture didn't happen, the woman returned to claw back her tip, accusing the restaurant changed the tip amount. Today, she's trying to get it back again, claiming that the restaurant tampered with her tip, but it's all for naught because they have a system where you pay at the table with a little card reader and you enter your own tip amount. So she should have said that glitched rather than trying to accuse them of changing it. But yeah, so they got their rapture tips, and this lady's regretting it because maybe the rapture did happen and we didn't know, and she didn't get taken in it.
She
But
didn't
anyways,
ascend.
yeah. What do you think of this
Maybe.
story, Shane?
Okay. Well, you know what, Jason? Maybe you're right. Maybe she didn't ascend. So therefore, now she needs her money back because she has to live in damnation with the rest of us. Or the fact that it wasn't the rapture coming. I mean, goodness. It's spend that rapture money. Spend it. That money
Yeah.
spends well. But
Can't take it
you
with
know,
you.
yeah, exactly. I mean, definitely you can't take it with you. But I got an email from or a text message from a friend of mine who sent me like these clips of all this stuff from the rapture, and they were talking about the biblical side of it, and I was like, well, there, of course there's stories and accounts of an eclipse, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be a rapture. I mean, I think it's funny. Tell you the
So
truth,
what other things did you see about the eclipse that was like apocalyptic? Or did you said at people at work had talked about it being their last day of work before the apocalypse on the eclipse? So what was your experience with that?
So I had some guys at work that were like, "All right, well, we'll see you next week." They acted like they weren't going to be coming back, And then I had a lot of people get really just conspiracy ridden, like, "So what do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to go on? How are we gonna solve these problems?" I'm like, "What?" I didn't personally. I didn't feel like there was this big rapture coming. I almost feel like it was very, very social media driven. Does that make sense? I feel like it was just
Yeah.
all over social media, eh, like the end of the world. Well, I didn't feel like that. Did you? Did you run into stuff that
I
people were
mean, I
saying?
saw it everywhere. So, I mean, there were all kinds of people talking about it. They were tying in the earthquakes to it and potential earthquakes to it. And I felt even before, like weeks before that nothing was going to happen. That
Yeah.
all of this was just hype. It's the same old eclipses. I mean, throughout history, eclipses have affected people's um people's view on the world, and eclipse did change things. I mean, back in medieval times, there was a war. Maybe not the medieval times, but definitely pre World War I. There was a big war going on and between two countries, and an eclipse happened, and they stopped fighting, and they took it as a sign as not to continue the war. But also, in the long past, they've always known when eclipses will happen.
Mhm.
They studied the stars, they knew when it was coming. So the leaders, the king or whatever you might call them, would have the priests map out when eclipses were coming and then use that because the lower class, this isn't all cultures, but this was in several cultures.
Mhm.
They would use that as divine reason for them being in power because they could predict the eclipses. Um,
Well, that's right. Ancient Egypt, they had that serpent, Apep, spirit of evil and chaos, and it was said to swallow the sun god Ra. So they would like require an army and other deities to sit there and stand guard, so that way that
Mhm.
you know, it would so they would cut Apep so that way they release Ra to prevent the world from being plunged into darkness. So, yeah.
So one thing, which I don't want to do a ton of conspiracy on this show, but maybe it could be a specific episode, or maybe we could do like a special thing where it's a small episode. But the state of the conspiracy, quote unquote, conspiracy community and world in the past couple of years has
Mhm.
just been crap. It's just been crap. And it's been
Yeah.
taken over politically. Everything has a political, and it's not that conspiracies in the past weren't political. There definitely were political conspiracies, but it's different now. And I don't want to go into the whole reason why right now, but I do want to say that every couple weeks, maybe almost every week, there's an end of the world conspiracy now.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
It's especially with the rise of TikTok. Um, you see them all the time. That's going to end this day, and then nothing happens. It just moves on to the next. So I mean, it's the same thing that people used to do with books
Mhm.
in the past. They would predict something, and then when it didn't happen, some people would stop following them, but other people would continue to follow them.
Mhm.
It's been
Yep.
really, in my opinion, it's been really bad the last couple of years with that. And not to say that some of their some of the individual reasons why they think the world will end on a certain date isn't interesting, but the same people keep making these predictions and nothing happens, and then it's just forgotten about. I guess that's the way the world these days. But the same thing happened with the eclipse, and it's all the people that were claiming all of these reasons why the world was going to end during the eclipse. I mean, it wasn't even just world ending. It wasn't just apocalyptic. It was all these things were supposed to happen. None of it happened. But those people are just going to still be listened to after this for the next thing.
Mhm.
I mean, that's people's individual choices, but I'm just, I'm a little bit of a rant right now because maybe
You're
I'm a
sick
little
of it?
disillusioned by some of the stuff I've seen lately. Um, because I'm an old school conspiracy theorist. I started looking into conspiracies and researching them when I was 14.
Mhm.
And yeah, but as far as the eclipse goes, I didn't think anything was going to happen. I think that most of the time, in my opinion, when something, so there's we're talking about two different things here, right? One is the apocalypse, which is created by either God or something outside of man, at least like an asteroid or whatever, where men
Yep.
don't have control over any of that. The other thing is, and that was also being talked about, is something conspiratorial done by a group of men to control the world or change the world or do something. There were several of those kind of predictions about the eclipse as well.
Yeah.
Neither of those, I think, will be marked by something like an eclipse, because I think that either entity will not want people anticipating something happening. It'll happen off guard. It'll happen when you don't think it's going to happen. So I never felt that anything was going to happen. And I also, like, I really trust my gut. I'm just that type of person, and I didn't have any feelings about this. So I didn't think anything was going to happen, and nothing happened. The rapture didn't happen that we know of. The
That we know of.
earthquakes that were predicted. I mean, there were people that were predicting the split of the country, that the New Madrid fault would go off and the whole country would split in half and fill in with another ocean. I mean, it got down to that. Or that our plates would all go wonky and we'd have worldwide earthquakes. There's yeah, I'm still ranting, but I think it's still good content.
No, random.
So there was a lot of people that forgot. I mean, I guess that still happens now, but in 2007, so a news story came out like a month before the eclipse where states were activating their National Guard, and people either didn't realize or they forgot that they did that for the last eclipse as well. And there's a very good reason for it, because where the eclipse goes across isn't just big cities where they have tons of police force. There's most small counties, they have one or two sheriffs for the entire county, maybe 10, but that's still for an entire county where they are planning on potentially getting thousands and thousands of people come in. So they just didn't have the police force to police that. So they activated the National Guard to bring in the National Guard to play policeman.
Yeah, 100%. I see it like that. Yeah.
They also told people to stock up on food and water. And a lot of the conspiracy theorists took this as, well, they're telling you that the end of the world's coming, so you need to stock up on food and water. But again, thousands and thousands of people coming to a small town where there's one grocery store that doesn't used to that kind of traffic. They just plus just getting around. They were telling people to stay home in those areas because you might as well. It's not like you need to go down the street to see a better eclipse. So there was that. The other thing is
go down the street to
the
see
NASA,
a better eclipse.
Yeah, the NASA rockets. So they shot off 3 rockets in the shadow of the eclipse. They did the same thing for all the past eclipses, and they did 3 this year. In 2017, they shot off 30 rockets. But again, the conspiracy theorists thought, or were claiming, that NASA must know something. It's the only reason they would shoot off these rockets into the shadow of the eclipse. There was people tying biblical things to it, which you could, and I'm sure, as you know, being a preacher, if you want to interpret something from the Bible, you will find something that will interpret your views into it.
They will.
So there's that. So, and really, so CERN also started up. I still don't know if it started up before or started up on that day, or if they're doing tests on that day. But anyways, people were tying CERN tests to the eclipse like they knew something. There's a very good reason why they do these scientific tests under the path of the eclipse. So the Earth has an electric relationship with the sun. The sun has an electric relationship with every single body in our solar system. And when the moon is passing over and casting a shadow, it interrupts that in a way that's different than on the night side of the planets. So they send up rockets into the lower atmosphere and upper atmosphere to run tests that are in that unique environment that is only found during an eclipse. So there isn't any weird, strange conspiracy with that. I mean, the people that believe that will just say, oh, well, that's what's being told to you, so you don't know.
Yeah.
Either way, nothing happened. So I guess we'll just have to wait.
Well, how do you explain all the earthquakes?
Yeah.
Have you
Well,
heard that one?
earthquakes happen too. Earthquakes happen too.
They happen. That's the one thing I've been hearing. I came back and I said, "Hey, I didn't see any, welcome back. It's
No.
it's Monday." Did you watch the eclipse?
No, I
Did you
was
watch
at
it?
work. It got a little dark outside. I didn't go outside and look at it. I don't know why. I
I
just
uh
didn't feel
I
like it.
did. I went
Yeah.
up on the roof at work. I was at work, yeah, obviously. It was afternoon,
I saw the
That's what happens.
2017 one, which was more closer to totality here in Kansas City than this one was. So I saw that one in 2017. So it's just like I don't feel like getting up and going outside.
What totality were you at? Yeah, you were more than we were.
I don't know exactly. I think it was 91% here.
Yeah. Yeah, you were definitely more. It got dim out. It didn't get dark. It got
Yeah.
dim out here, and I was in Omaha, Nebraska, so
But yeah, so I look at it this way. I'm a like I stated at the beginning of this, I love researching conspiracies. It's something that I've always found fascinating. I personally, when it comes down to the government, I don't trust a lot of them, but I look at it in a different way than I feel a lot of conspiracy theorists.
I think you do as well. I always felt like you've
Things,
been really fair.
yeah, just because something can be a conspiracy doesn't mean that it is. Just because the government might be able to pull off something doesn't mean that they did.
Mhm.
I've
That's
always
right.
struggled with I you know there's a lot of parts of the government I feel personally are inept. So it's hard for me to look at them saying that they're inept, but they're still able to pull off some big conspiracy. But there's also small groups. I just there's a lot of people that I interact personally with these days that every little news story that happens is some part of big conspiracy. It's like they forget that accidents happen. For example, the 911 systems went down in a few states around the country a couple nights ago. And could it have been some kind of cyber attack? Sure. I try not to jump to that. And it turned out the next day that somebody in Kansas City cut a fiber wire that they shouldn't have, and it went, made 4 states go down. But to a
Conspiracy.
few people, that I know, until that story came out, they were convinced it was the government testing some way to control us, which it could have been, but that doesn't mean that it was. Anyways, I definitely got long-winded there, and
No, no,
as
no,
far as
that's
the
more than fine.
eclipse
I like it.
as far as the eclipse goes, um, yeah, nothing happened, and this
Well,
lady's not getting
that
her
just
money back.
you're not getting your money back. You know what? Those were good. Those were Rapture tacos, and
Yeah.
money is well spent. So let me ask you this: since we went down that rabbit hole, we have to say when we went through that test through the cell providers. Do you remember that? Everybody got the
Yeah.
emergency
Mhm.
broadcast test, and it shut your phone off.
Yeah.
How many people freaked out that you knew?
Freak out is different than them thinking that it's something conspiratorial.
I had a
Maybe a
lot of
couple people
people that I
freaked
knew that
out,
freaked.
but I had a lot more people convinced it was something that it wasn't. That's the thing. It doesn't have to be scary, or it doesn't have to be a freak out if your mindset is everything that they're doing is something negative, nefarious towards you.
Yeah, I had a person telling me, "Well, you better get all your stuff prepared. You better get all your extra toilet paper and all your extra food. Make
Mm,
sure you have a place to go because now you're aware that they can completely cut you off from everything." I
yeah.
was like, "No, it was just my cell phone."
I mean, in
You
the
know?
end, I would rather have people question everything to not question anything.
Yes.
I just think it's gone too far. And I'll to end this part, I'll just make a good comparison within the paranormal field itself. So there are, I think the word is used incorrectly, but there are skeptics, right, that don't, in the traditional, not the traditional, in the current use of the word skeptic, anybody that doesn't believe something in the paranormal field is a skeptic. They don't believe it's possible. They are just as bad, or the people that think that everything is a ghost is just as bad as the people that think that nothing can, like, that's not possible that there are ghosts.
Oh, I agree with you
So
there.
it's the same way in the conspiracy world. If you
Mhm.
don't question things, if you are convinced that everything is nefarious, it's just as bad as the people that don't question things.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you 100% on that. We ran into that in the past.
Yeah. You just have to make up your own mind, and don't, you just follow your gut, because your gut knows best.
We are going to get into some listener submitted stories. If you have anything that you want to send us that is strange or paranormal, please send it to www.strangeparanormal.com or 913-535-6322. We would love to hear your stories. So today's first story is titled Granddad's UFO Story. My granddad passed away about 11 years ago. He was a good man, honest, hard worker, and he had 4 brothers and 2 sisters. He had a couple of brilliant unexplained mystery books in his house when I was growing up that really amazed and influenced me. All sorts of stories from UFOs to spontaneous combustion and the rest. Lots of pictures and descriptions that fascinated me. Anyway, when I was about 16, we were sitting around and he told me a story about a UFO his brother saw that has always stuck with me. And I thought it was worth retelling. He never repeated it to me, but it always felt visceral and real when he did discuss it. So his brother and 4 of his friends went out fishing. In the Midlands of the UK, there was a lake that was relatively secluded and had a few caves around the side. You had to climb up a hill and back down to get to the lake, but the fishing was good. His brother and his friends were fishing for a few hours when they noticed a bright light and a spinning craft in the sky. At first, it seemed playful, like it was trying to get their attention. It was daytime, and they all felt fascinated by it initially. After 5 minutes of this, the craft got closer and closer to them and was spinning faster. And at this point, it felt to them like the craft was harassing them and they were intimidated. They retreated from the lake into one of the nearby caves, and the craft came close to the entrance of the cave before shooting away after another few minutes, all of which occurred in the daytime. They didn't see the craft again. When his brother got home, he told the story of what happened. No one really gave it much mind or believed the story in particular. Now, on to the strange part that gives the story some kudos. The next day, when they woke up literally to a man, all 5 of the friends had bright white hair. Bear in mind, they were around 18 years old when this occurred, so likely late 60s, early 70s, but they all had normal black ginger hair for kids of that era. From then on, each of them had bright white gray hair and never changed from that point. And I knew the brother he was talking about. He always had white hair from the day that I knew him. Anyway, the only reason I feel like it's a compelling story was firstly because my granddad had never told me any story of this kind before. And secondly, because he remembered his brother's hair turning white overnight and staying that way for the rest of his life. That's kind of crazy. What do you
Yeah.
think, man?
So first, I want to say I'm going to be that grandfather that has all those books and UFO and spooky things for the kids to look at. I already have them, so I just need the grandkids someday.
That's do you remember those? Do you remember the like I can't remember what they were. Weren't they they were like white books and they had pictures on them and they had like spontaneous combustion. Do you remember those books?
I have
I'm gonna
black
have to find
ones that are like a Reader's Digest series that has I probably have 500 um paranormal conspiracy books, and most of them are from the 70s or earlier, 80s, 70s, and 60s.
That's awesome. Of
I
course, you would
actually
have 500.
that's one thing that I collect. I collect vintage metaphysical books and
Sweet.
paranormal and UFO books. I haven't read hardly any of them, but I buy them because they're all usually typically I find them for a couple dollars and I'll just throw them throw them on there. So far, I've only ever bought like 2 or 3 that I already had. So,
That's pretty
but
good, man.
yeah. Anyways, so sometime we'll go through some of my collection on this show or on this channel anyways. As far as
What
the UFO story goes.
white hair.
Um
Let's
yeah,
discuss
so
the white hair.
well first I wanted to mention that when you are out on a lake, you are very exposed. They're lucky that
Mhm.
they had a cave to go into because you can't get away when you're out on a lake. Like you can obviously drive to the shore, but
Mhm.
there's no cover out there. So that's
Nope.
even scarier in my opinion. Because what are you gonna do? Dive in the water? Then
Yeah.
yeah.
What's in the water? You know?
Um, I want to go to this lake because if it has a cave attached to it, that sounds fun. Um,
Right?
as far as the white hair goes, I mean, there's the old it's not really a wives' tale. I guess this is an old anecdote of, people getting scared to the point of their hair color changing. So is it just the fright that changed the hair, or did they do something to them to change the hair?
All 5 of them got so scared that their hair went to bright white. Even, like, the ginger and the brunette and the black hair is
Yeah,
just all white. That's
which
crazy.
which to me suggests that something was done to them
Mhm.
in a way. Maybe it was just an a side effect of being in the field of whatever generates the power for the UFO. Um, because for all of them to go white, I mean, the story is scary, don't get me wrong, and I'm definitely jaded to that type of stuff because of the
Mhm.
field that I'm in. It doesn't sound similar to other stories I've heard of people being so terrified that their hair goes white.
Mhm.
So to me, I think that maybe the radiation, whatever type of radiation that was coming off of it, or the propulsion system did something to change the hair. And I'm wondering, and I don't remember it mentioning in there, was it only the hair on their head? Like if they grew a beard, would it also be white?
It just didn't say. It
Like
said that,
was
all
the hair
5
under
of
their
them.
arms or their pubic hair turned white?
It just says that, when they woke up literally to a man the next day, all 5 of the friends had bright white hair. Bear in mind they were around 18 years old when this occurred. So, yeah, you got a point. Like, if it was all hair on their body, then it was definitely something from propulsion, radiation, um, unless it was a way that whatever
I
this may have been could focus the
yeah.
radiation of the I don't know. This is the only information that I've got. I guess I could email back and ask more questions.
Yeah. I don't know. So I guess I don't know. I guess I don't know much about the process of your hair changing colors. Like when you go gray, does the hair on your head just turn gray or does it grow out gray and then it's gray? Like, so if you get scared to death, like if you get not to death, but if you get scared to the point that your hair color changes, does the hair that's actually out of your head change or is it just the new growth that
I would
changes?
think it would be the new growth, honestly, because he can't. These are already dead cells. I mean, what are you?
I think so. I think that's right. I'm not 100%. I'd say 99%. I think that's right.
Mhm. Yeah, I think. Well, like
I
I
mean,
said.
in pop culture, they've definitely shown people get scared to the point that their hair just turns white. But I don't see it happening that way. I see it as the next growth part would be. changed.
It said the next day. So then if it's a radiation type thing to where it was in the air and it automatically turned their hair white. So then here's the other side. Did they have burns? Was their skin more red? Was it sensitive?
I
Did
feel
any of
like
these
they would
men
have
have
mentioned that.
cancer? You know?
Yeah, I mean,
Did they
that's
end
a
up dying from
long-term thing,
cancer?
so
Yeah.
yeah.
And this did happen in the 60s and 70s, so those answers are probably out there now, but yep, one of those things that we need to get research into, but at any rate, thank you so much for sending that story. And we got more. So let's get into some more listener submitted stories, Jason.
For some background, I recently took a job at a retirement home that has been around for over 100 years. It started out as an alternative to the poor farm, which is a rural US version of the poorhouse, aka a place for people who had literally nowhere to go. As time passed, they eventually became a retirement home, but ghost stories around in this place are abound in this place. Everyone who works or lives here has had at least one story involving the ghosts of residents who have long since shuffled off the mortal coil. Said they didn't have an experience until this morning, which I'm assuming is when they wrote this in, but I'm not sure. One of my favorite residents was this sprightly elderly gentleman named Paul. He was one of the first residents to greet me when I moved in. Part of the job requires that I live on property in case of emergencies in the middle of the night, and always ask for a cup of regular coffee with 2 teaspoons of sugar. According to him, I was the only worker who got his coffee right. Just a sweet old man. Part of my job is to ring a bell during meal times to let residents know it's chow time. Every morning, I'd go down the hall, ringing the bell, and Paul always said, "Good morning, Tinkerbell." As I went down the hall, it eventually became his nickname for me. This morning, all is well. I go down the hall, ringing the bell. As I pass Paul's door, he said, "Good morning, Tinkerbell." I finished my rounds and prepared Paul's cup of coffee with 2 teaspoons of sugar, as I always do, setting it at his spot. We served breakfast, and I eventually noticed that Paul's spot is empty. Another part of my job is to check for people who haven't shown up for meal times. So I make my list and start looking. I go to Paul's door and knock, no response. I try again, no response. Because we're a retirement community, we have people who might need medical help. As a result, part of my job is to enter the rooms and see if someone needs help after I knock twice and there's no answer. So I take out my keys and unlock the door, stepping inside. Inside the room was immaculate. The bed was made. There was no sign of him. Indeed, it was like he had just stepped out of the room. When I returned to the dining room, Paul's spot was still empty. I wasn't concerned. Sometimes residents head out for breakfast or to run errands and don't tell anyone. It was after breakfast I was setting the tables for lunch when the administrator arrived, looking for the master keys. It was then I learned that Paul had been visiting his daughter when he suffered a massive stroke and passed away. I was a little sad and said, "It must have happened recently." I heard him say, "Good morning, Tinkerbell," as I was ringing the bell for breakfast. Luke looked at me. Luke was the administrator,
Mhm.
looked at me with a surprised look and said, "That's impossible. Paul was pronounced DOA last night at the hospital." I looked at Luke and said, "Then who said good morning to me?" It's a good story.
That's a good story. Okay. This is what I'm thinking. Like we spoke earlier, we always try to find the non-paranormal and in these paranormal stories. So I'm thinking if this woman is walking through, it did say it was a woman, didn't it? I guess I didn't
Yeah,
realize.
I'm assuming so.
Okay, so this person, I don't know. So let's say this person's walking through, they're telling everybody it's chow time, they're telling everybody good morning, and then somebody knows that Paul's not there, but every morning Paul always says, "Good morning, Tinkerbell." Maybe somebody filled in the void for him since he wasn't there.
Maybe. It also could be that she's in her routine. She's in her routine doing the same thing she does every day.
So maybe he did and
She
didn't say it.
potentially thought she heard it because that's what she hears every day,
Mhm.
right then. Though this one to me is pretty good paranormal story. I
Mhm.
feel like it probably happened.
Yeah, they're pretty sure of what they heard. There's a couple things that you always look at whenever you see this, and one thing that you look at is like, was there repeating? Did they repeat the story? Were they given like more than one reason for their facts? Just story is out there. This is what happened. No more, no less. Nothing. Not trying to like force, you know, force the story. So to me, I was like, wow, interesting.
The other thing is, from my experience, when it comes to paranormal stories,
Hmm.
the simpler the better. The
Yep.
the simpler, the more likely it actually happened. Not that there isn't complicated, scary, crazy stuff that happens. It does.
Hmm.
But to me, the simplicity of this story, and if you think about from the aspect of this gentleman, Paul, what he may be able to do once he's passed over, this is a pretty simple thing.
Hmm.
So I see it as a lot more likely than some other crazy, like if he come running out of there and and interacted with her in an odd fashion. Um, yeah, this is simple. It's something I could see very well happening in a ghostly manner for sure.
I enjoyed this story. And the other thing is what if it's just a matter of, so Paul was announced dead on arrival at the hospital the previous night. The next day, Paul's right back in his routine,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, there's two main types of hauntings. We don't have to go into too big a detail with them right now, but there's residual and active hauntings.
Mhm.
And residual would be just there's some part or some echo of that person repeating what they do every day, which could
Yep.
account for this. Or there's active where it's a sentient entity of some kind that knows what it's doing and it's just saying good morning because that's you know it wanted either maybe what he wanted to say bye one last time and he's not going to be there again, or he's actually haunting the place in some fashion. So
Best way to
yeah,
reach out right there.
this
Enjoyed
could
this.
be this could be either one.
This is another wonderful story that was shared. I was asked not to share the actual location of this place, and mainly because there is an opportunity for us to possibly go investigate this place out, and I
Nice.
don't want to be giving our goods away quite yet. So here we go. I went to school in a rural area. It wasn't uncommon for schools to combine when the small town population started to deplete. When I was in junior high, I was bused 45 minutes away to another town to go to school. Let me begin by telling you that it wasn't all that bad. You see, these are the days before cell phones and the internet was in every home. So going to another town next door was like going to an alien planet. I completely agree with that. I wasn't very popular in school, so when we were bused to another town to go to school, it was like going to a whole new world. And for some reason, the people there, they liked me. My story begins with an emergency bathroom break. There was a restroom right next to my classroom, but there was no way I was going to go use that restroom and blow it out to get some horrible nickname from some kid who was using the restroom and recognized my shoes. My class was up on the third floor, and I knew for a fact that there was a huge, barely used locker room in the basement. This locker room looked like something out of Harry Potter. Once I was excused to go to the restroom, I raced down the blue colored stone steps, made it, barely. As I was sitting on the toilet, being thankful that I made it and no one else was there, and believe it or not, there was actually toilet paper in there.
Hmm.
Let's see here. That's when I heard footsteps. They were a loud, hard-soled type shoe noise like a teacher would wear. I could hear them make their way through the locker room and directly to the long corridor of toilets in the back, where I was sitting in hushed quietness. Well, sort of, if you know what I mean. There was a pause, and I heard the steps come to a stop. And then the footsteps continued, but they sounded like someone was walking on gravel this time, not walking on a stone floor anymore. I heard the steps approach my stall and stop. I couldn't see any feet at the bottom of this door, and I was able to peer through the door crack and saw nothing out there. I had a clear shot of the sun rays shooting through the dust in the air. Why was there dust? What was the gravel noise, and who was out there? I just sat there in quiet. No noise came from the other side of the stall. I waited, and then I did the bravest thing any junior high kid could do. I flushed the toilet. Nothing. No noise. After what felt like an eternity, I finished up and opened up the stall, and I could see there wasn't anyone around, so I walked over to the sink to wash my hands. As I was scrubbing up, I was looking down, and I noticed that I could see my footprints in the dusty floor. I could see where I walked in and walked over to the stall, and I could see my footprints leading from the stall back to where I was standing. I noticed another set of footprints that were larger feet than mine. They had a clear imprint of a dress shoe, but the footprints went around the sink with no footprints coming in and no footprints coming out of the restroom. This old 3-story school building was built in the 1890s, and it has now been turned into a loft-style apartment. Okay, so when he's talking about the footprints going around the sink, I know this bathroom. So,
Yeah.
it's an old school pedestal sink. It's a round concrete sink that has foot levers, and it's in the middle of the bathroom. So when he's discussing seeing the footprints going around it, he's standing on a pedestal pushing a lever down with his feet. And there's like a fountain in the center, and it comes over and washes your hands. So, but I didn't know about this story. This was before my time that I had known of this place. So, very interesting. What do you think?
So when he mentions not being able to hear anything, does he mean that all sound is gone, or he just doesn't hear anything out of the ordinary?
So, this was recorded. I recorded this. So, what he's talking about is he's talking about after he flushed the toilet, he didn't hear anything on the other side of the door. He couldn't hear anything. No
Okay.
footsteps, no breathing, nothing. But he did hear the footsteps stop. He didn't hear anything after that. So,
I mean, nobody knows their space better than themselves, so it's hard to comment on it, other than to say that if you hear something walk up, you're going to hear it walk away.
mhm.
And if there's dust there, you're going to see the footprints.
Yeah. I could kind of see what he was talking about when he said that he was looking through the stall. I think we've all been there before where you can kind of like see through the bathroom stall to make sure nobody's coming in while you're trying to do your business.
Yeah, and then
So-
sometimes when you're in a public space, that crack is there and it's in front of you. You can't help it. And you accidentally make eye contact with somebody as they walk in.
and it's only awkward for everybody involved.
Mhm.
I mean,
I don't
if
understand why they can't just make full wall stalls. Why they have to leave a gap in there. And it doesn't make any sense.
the hinge
But
has gotta
anyways,
pivot.
I
The hinge has
digress.
got to pivot, bro. But yes, why couldn't they be like sliders?
Yeah, or something. I mean, not the way that they are.
I thought it was eerie, to tell you the truth. to hear him tell me about like the clicking of the hard-soled shoes, and then it stopped, and then it sounded like somebody was walking on gravel. That was I've never heard anything like that before, so to me that was like very uncharacteristic of any type of experience, let's say, that I've ever heard of. I've never heard of anybody describe a sound changing like that.
Yeah,
It was
it
cool
makes
though.
me wonder. Like, I don't know the space. It makes me
Mhm.
wonder if the floor had changed at some point in history. Like if there was, and gravel, I mean, you know the sound of gravel when you walk on it, but other things can sound like that as well. So maybe
Sure.
there's a history of the floor being different in that area, and it just happens to give the sound of gravel because that's what you know.
Mhm.
Um, I'm excited about the potential of going and investigating this place. That sounds cool.
Yeah, so it is now turned into a loft apartment complex, which
Mhm.
is kind of crazy because I'm trying to figure out how they did this to this building. Because I know the building. I have been in it, and I if I could explain anything about that locker room restroom that he was in, you guys, this thing is huge. Like, this locker room is huge with the big windows that are up tall. They're not down, they're not full length windows. They're right up at the top, but there's a lot of them. So it's really like bright in there from the light. But everything in there is stone and stainless steel, like ice basins where people would ice in, and they had like pipes and tubes running everywhere. I only remember seeing it from a child's mind's eye. So being an adult, when I'm thinking about it, it was just very steampunk almost, in this locker room, because it was a full-fledged locker room. At the time, this place had one of the biggest basketball gymnasiums
Okay.
in the early 1900s. So it had huge locker rooms. Now, I couldn't attest for the female side. Probably wasn't as massive as the male side, to tell you the truth, in the early 1900s. They probably weren't
Yeah.
promoting to the ladies then, but I
So is
can't.
all the original space taken up by lofts, or is any of the space still original?
So I don't know. I'm gonna be making a trip out there to find out because I'm extremely curious. I don't think that man, I don't know how they would have done it to the basement. I'll be honest with you. It wasn't like a regular basement that you would like locker room. You just open up a door and you're in a locker room.
Mhm.
You go down a whole flight of stairs, and it's like almost like a grand entrance into this locker room. It's crazy. So yeah, um I don't know, but okay, so on the same page as that, uh our son, who's 23, he lived in a school that was converted into an apartment, loft style apartments, and his apartment had a basketball gymnasium floor and part of a bleacher in his actual apartment. It was really, really freaking cool looking, but, I just don't know how they would do this, and honestly, anybody living in the town or around the area, I would almost be terrified to live there. I probably wouldn't be terrified, but place was creepy. So, yeah, I don't know, man. When they take these old buildings, they turn them into apartments.
Mhm.
I'm curious, so I'm gonna get a hold of, the management there and see what they've done, what we can do to investigate it, and see what we can get in there to do it, and I think it'd be a lot of fun, and now I'm really, really curious.
Yeah, so there's a hospital in Kansas City that I've investigated I think I talked about it on the show already once a little bit. Um, they were planning on turning the whole thing into lofts. I'm not sure if they ever actually did turn but they turned part of it into lofts for sure. But it would make me think when I was in there investigating, like, who gets the loft where the morgue was? And do you know that it had been a morgue in that spot before? Do they have to tell you that kind of thing? Yeah, so I don't think they ever finished that because then like COVID hit and as
And
far as I know, the last time I drove by there, it was still the wing that we investigated was still abandoned. It was like a 6-story hospital wing that had been set on fire at one point in one part of the building and all kinds of stuff, but it still had the morgue in there.
that's what I'm saying. There's still a morgue, man.
I wish I could go back in that space, but I don't think it's
Wonder if
going to
it had
happen.
the
It's been
wall with the
overtaken by,
freezers in it.
yeah, it had 4 stalls, because it was just a hospital morgue, not like a big morgue. So
Did you
yeah,
go into the morgue side?
I did. I mean,
Did you go
I
into
didn't
one of
go
the
into
slides?
one of the trays. I was with some people that the people that were leading that team. Um, After that investigation, I didn't necessarily get along with because of who. I don't want to go into a whole bunch of drama with them. That was in 2017 when I investigated, and I only got invited along because I had a podcast, and they hoped I talked about them on my podcast.
Oh, that's crappy.
That's what I found out later. But while we were investigating, I wanted to
You can
explore
talk
the
about them. It's all
building.
right.
I don't even know if they're active anymore. And
Oh.
I mean, if there's people that are listening that were there, there's still a few of them that I do talk to, and they've moved away from those people as well. But the people that were leading that team were I I, it was a disbarred lawyer. I found out later he was pretty shady to begin with,
Oh.
but they investigated in an odd fashion. Oh, everybody investigates a little bit differently, which is fine. I'm not talking against their investigation technique. We just
Mhm.
investigated differently. I like to, and you're in a 6-story hospital. You should explore the whole fucking place. That's
Yeah.
what I do. I
Yeah.
mean, I understand trying to stay in one place you think activity is going to happen, but if I get one night in there, I'm constantly moving around, exploring the whole place. They just like to stick to 2 or 3 places and didn't move around at all. So I was off by myself for half the night. I actually got my hand grabbed while I was by myself in a
You
maze
told me about
of the
this one.
basement
Yep.
or of
Yeah.
one of the main floors. But
So, we already opened up that can of worms. So we're
yeah,
just gonna go into it. Tell me
okay,
and tell our
all right.
listeners about your hand getting grabbed.
So I guess yeah, we'll change this instead of a UFO story for this
Yeah,
episode.
let's just keep rolling with it.
So the location is Trinity Lutheran Hospital in Kansas City that shut down probably less than 10 years before when I investigated in 2017. 10 years at the most, because it still had all the equipment left in there. So it was probably only closed like 5 years or less at that time. I got invited out to investigate it. And like I said, I found out later that the only reason I got invited to investigate was because they wanted me to thank them and talk about them on the podcast. And I don't even remember what the team name was. I'm not going to say the guy's name because I don't want to put it out. I don't want to deal with that.
You don't want
But
to put them under fire too
um
much.
well, I'm not worried about that. But I just don't want to add to the drama. The people that know.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah, so I got invited. We weren't allowed to talk about the location and put out that we were there, but I feel comfortable now talking about it. The location itself didn't as has had a big trespassing issue over the years. We had to actually clear the place. We had to walk through and we had to hire security, which happened to be the husband of somebody that was with us, but we had to technically bring in security and clear the building to make sure there weren't people in there before we investigated.
Mhm.
One of the wings of the hospital had already been turned into lofts. but we had one of the main wings. We couldn't go to the basement because it had flooded and there was a diesel spill down there, is what we were told. So we didn't go down there. Now, when I first got there, it was still light out. Actually, nobody else was there yet. So I walked around the building, and as I was walking around the west side of that wing, I was walking by the basement, and they were big windows, but they were blacked out, so you couldn't see in. I heard something bang on the inside of that window, and it would have been the basement, which we never got down to. We weren't allowed to go down there. So it kind of pushed out that window, and it was loud. There was clearly somebody or something on the inside. Could have been down there the whole time we were there that night. We don't know because we weren't supposed to go down there. Now this location, it had been, somebody went through and stripped out most of the copper wires from the walls. Somebody had set a fire in one spot that had spread through one of the floors, and it was scorched, but it wasn't like burnt to the point where, either the breathing or we were having trouble moving around. Like, it was just kind of scorched. It got put out quickly, I think. So we got there before dark. We all got together. There was probably 7 of us, 8 of us. And I knew 2 of the people before then, but the rest of them were all new to me. And which isn't a, that was a weird sound. I don't know. Did you hear that? Anyways, doesn't matter. So when we got there, like I said, we had to go floor by floor and room by room to clear it to make sure there was nobody in there. It was still daylight. So that happened. And then we started to investigate. And so the condition of the place is there were a few different stairwells, but each stairwell only went to a couple different floors. You couldn't go to one stairwell and go all the way down from the top floors. You could go, so you could originally, but it was in such bad shape that you couldn't anymore. So you could go down like 1 level or 2 levels, and then you had to make your way across that floor to another stairwell to go down the rest of the way.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I don't remember, since it was 7 years ago now. I don't remember how many different stairwells and all that off the top of my head. But like I said at the beginning of this, they had a different fashion of investigating. They picked a couple different spots and they just stayed in those couple different spots for that night. And I am an explorer. You know that about me.
Oh, yeah.
So I decided I'm going to go off on my own. I'm going to go walk around. I ended up on the roof. I didn't go down to the basement. I do wish now that I had gone down to the basement. If I had known that I wasn't going to get to go back to that place. I didn't get to go back to that place because I got yelled at for not thanking them on the show afterwards. They didn't invite me again. But that being said, I didn't go down to the basement, but I went to every other spot possible. But on the,
not mad at all.
on the, I believe it was the 3rd floor. It was the floor above the main floor that we were on, which I believe was the 3rd floor. At one point, I was, so in some areas, they had spray painted arrows on the wall to let people know the quickest way out from that area. So you can follow them back to a stairwell and know where you're going, because it was literally a maze. And that, I don't think there was any power in there. So it's not like you were having lights on and stuff like that. So I was on the 2nd floor by myself. I knew at least that the people I was investigating, they weren't there because they were all on the main floor that we were set up on, and they were all in the morgue. So I was walking through this floor that didn't have arrows because I had wandered into an area that they didn't go into a lot. And it happened to be like the kitchen area and the staff area. And they, it was like a staging area for the food for the hospital. And I had my GoPro on a monopod in one hand, and I had a flashlight in the other hand. And I was walking along, and I'd swing the camera and the light into one room and walk by, and sort of like that, a little bit longer. It was a monopod that goes out to like 8 feet long.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it was more like a walking stick in a way. So yeah, I would do that. I would walk by different rooms and shine my light in there, my camera. And at one point, when I was turning into one of those rooms behind the kitchen, my hand was in such a way that it was holding the GoPro, and it felt like somebody took my hand to shake it. Like they took my hand to shake it, like they were saying hello. And I felt it. And I couldn't see anything, I couldn't hear anything, but I could feel something grabbing my hand. Like they were going to shake it and say hello. Well, I froze because I just wanted to make sure I paid attention to what was going on. Um, and I do have this on camera somewhere. I have to pull up the video some point. But I froze, and then a few seconds later, I start backing out of that room, and I make my way back, and I had to try to remember the path that I came to get to that floor, to get to that area, to get back to the stairwell.
Because
So
it
I
was such
did
a
that.
maze already.
Well, it was such a maze, and that now I was like, I'm alone, and something grabbed my hand. And though I wasn't necessarily scared that something really bad happens, it's just kind of preservation. So I mean, I've always told my fellow investigators that I've had on teams over the years that if you get scared or if you get spooked, which happens no matter what you do, no matter how,
Mhm.
don't run, don't get upset, stop, slow down, and make your way out of there. There's no reason to stay in that area. So that's what I was trying to do. So I made my way back down. I made my way to the rest of the people, and they said that I was white as a ghost, like all of the blood had drained out of my face. And I was like, I wasn't in shock. I wouldn't say I was medically in shock, but I was like, something happened. Like
Mhm.
it took me a little while to feel normal again. And yeah, it's just
Now
something grabbing my hand. I've had things happen that were more forceful and more intimidating than that, but I was in a very unknown place, in a maze by myself, in a huge building where nobody was coming to me. I had no way to I had my phone in my pocket, I guess. But yeah.
so I'll say this, doing investigations with you, you're not easily startled. Or honestly, I would say sometimes when there is an occurrence, y you're not easily shaken. Um, Point in case with you and I in the hallway, when I had come to tell you what had happened, you were like, "Yeah? Alright." I was like, "No, but you don't understand." Because see, I was at that point, when I had come upon you that I just had something really strange happen right in front of my face with my son, and I'm telling you because I thought you were still with me. So I mean, I can share what happened there.
Hold
Um,
on. Before we do that, before we end the segment on the hospital, I
mhm.
do want to show something real quick that I have
Oh yeah,
from the
go ahead.
hospital itself. So let me grab that. Okay, so they did tell us that any of the stuff that wasn't like tied down in the place, because there was just shit laying everywhere that we
Mhm.
could take. We could take because it's all going to get thrown away anyways. So I grabbed two things, and one is just a simple old school Schlitz malt liquor bottle or can. And I don't know
Okay.
why it was in there because it's
Awesome.
super old.
That's
I think it was
super
in an
old.
area that wasn't like used very often,
Were there broken walls
like a
around it?
maintenance kind of area.
Were there
No, I
broken
don't. I mean,
walls?
I don't remember exactly where I pulled it out of there. I know
Oh,
where I did pull this out of. So this hospital, it was a teaching hospital. So I have a diploma book from Trinity Lutheran Hospital that has an unsigned diploma in it that I found in one of the administration offices. And this is just an example. But yeah, it says Trinity Lutheran Hospital, School of histologic technique. Now, this is just a file copy, but yeah, I thought that was pretty cool, and I have that sitting on my shelf from things of haunted places.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, how cool was it that I was able to find something that actually had the name of the place on it? So,
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
but yeah, anyway, so let's go into your story, and then I think that'll be enough to close out this episode.
So we're going to go into two things. One is getting touched, getting grabbed. I got grabbed, and it was the oddest kind of deal. So we were actually out with my cousin, and we were riding on our four-wheelers, and we went to this old abandoned house, right? It was way out on the middle of a level B road, and this house had an upstairs and a downstairs, but the stairs to go up were broken out. So the only way we could get up there was a ladder. So my cousin and I, being the idiots that we were, we went down to the farmhouse, excuse me, down the road, and borrowed the farmer's ladder. He let us. And so we go back to this house, and when I'm telling you this house is like beat up, there's no doors, no windows. The furniture's like, if furniture that was in there was like beat up, flipped over. If you've seen the Blair Witch Project, it looks like that house on the inside. There's some stuff scattered, the walls are falling apart. But we weren't going into the basement, dude. We were going upstairs. So we wanted to get upstairs. So we go and get this ladder, and my cousin's telling me that he wants to go and check out the property. So we get this ladder put up there, and I start climbing up the ladder, and I get, probably about 6 rungs up, and I'm reaching my arms over from the ladder because the way I have it, there's no railing or anything. So I have to kind of like get to the top of the ladder and kind of like belly crawl myself the rest of the way onto the floor because it was right at the top of the ladder. And right before I start to bend over to belly crawl, I feel a hand on my calf, but it doesn't just like touch me. It grabs my calf and stops me. Me being me, I thought it was my cousin. So I'm telling him, hey, knock it off, dude. You're going to make me fall. And it squeezed. And I was like, dude, knock it off. And then I hear my cousin holler at me from outside, and he's like, knock what off? I turned around and looked behind me, and there was nothing there. And I just stood on the top of the ladder. I don't know how long I stood up there, man. Long enough for my cousin to come in the house and make fun of me for standing at the top of the ladder, like white knuckled on the very top. But yeah, that was kind of a crazy occurrence. That house is no longer there, but spent a lot of time investigating that house. That was a lot of fun. So let's talk a little bit about your unshakable nature, because
I wouldn't say that I'm unshakable. I would say that I have a demeanor that doesn't show my emotions very well.
Yeah, well, especially during investigations. I'll say that, especially during investigations. So if you've ever investigated with you, if some people have who are probably listening to this, and a lot of people haven't. Not to say that they couldn't, but they just haven't yet. So I had an occurrence that happened to my son and I during an investigation with Jason. Should we say where we were at, or do we want to wait?
Might as well.
Okay,
No,
we were at the Malvern Manor in Malvern, Iowa. So at any rate,
we didn't tell this story on the first episode, did we, with Josh? Or did we say we were going to wait? I just wanted to make sure.
No,
go ahead then. Go ahead then.
No,
I just wanted to make sure. I knew we had mentioned it, but I don't think we put it in the episode.
No, we'll go. So we'll start. I'll let you edit.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, you're good now. Just start now.
So we were at the Malvern Manor, and Jason is we're up in the attic. Actually, we're all up in the attic, and for those of you who may or may not know, for a weekend bonding experience, we stayed the night in the Malvern Manor, and my family and I. So my wife, myself, and our two youngest boys who are 14 and 16. So we stayed there, kind of family bonding. Great thing to do, by the way. If you're going to do a family bonding experience, go do a paranormal investigation. It's so fun. So we were up in the attic and they had K2 meter and they were coming down. We were all coming down the steps from the attic, and Jason was behind me to my right. And my wife and my two youngest boys walk into the bedroom to our left, and they walk in and I walk up behind them in the doorway, lean up against the doorway. And I tell Jason, I'm like, well, I'm going to let them go into this room and kind of enjoy this a little bit. The meter was kind of being a little wonky. They were trying to make sure it wasn't on any wiring in the house. And so Jason and I were in the hallway talking. I said, hey, man, this is, just what the family needed. This is great that they're getting to experience this together. And we were having a conversation. Well, Jason was at my right shoulder and he walked around to be in front of me. Well, as you were in front of me, you started walking back down the hallway. So I followed you because we were just talking. And as we were talking, I asked you something about the hallway, if there were any weird occurrences that had happened in the hallway, and if there had been any occurrences that happened in the hallway, were they where we were at, in the rooms that we'd already known about? Were they at the end of the hallway where we were? And you didn't answer me. Now, I've said this before. I'm 5'9", Jason's 6'4", so he towers over me. And it was cold, so Jason had his hood on, and I was talking to him. And my son Keegan comes walking down the hallway, and he leans up against my left shoulder and puts his head on my shoulder. Well, I reached down and I grabbed my headlamp and I put my headlamp on and I turned it on and pointed it up to Jason. And when I did, Jason wasn't there. Completely gone.
What was there?
Well,
Nothing.
you were there,
Nothing.
but you weren't there.
Yeah.
It was a perfect shadow outline of a tall 6'4" figure. I say 6'4" because I swore it was you, with a hood on, and I was talking to him. You were to my right. You walked around me. I traced you. I followed you out into the hallway. And so my son comes up to my shoulder when I did that. And the first thing he said before I could even say anything, he goes, "Holy shit, Dad, what was that?" And I didn't try to correct him on his language. I was like, "What? You saw that?" And he's like, "Yeah." So I look up again and I look down to make sure I'm not like losing my mind. And obviously I called my wife and my other son out of the bedroom. It's like, hey, let's go find Jason. And I came downstairs to find you. And I told you verbatim what had just happened because I was still in shock, like I was looking at you, or what I thought was the outline of you, and you were just, as soon as my light hit you, you were gone. What I thought was you. So I was probably a little pale, but I was
Well, and
more
let's mention
excited.
that it was definitely dark in there, but
Oh, it
there's
was very dark.
windows on that floor. So it's not like it's pitch black where you can't see
No.
anything. So if there's a shadow in front of those windows, especially, you're going to see it. You're
Well,
going
there's
to
a
see the
light
darker
outside of that
spots.
window.
Yeah, you're going to see the darker spots in the room for sure.
Well, we were in the hallway. So if you guys would close your eyes and imagine standing in a hallway, and so the way you were was, if you're standing down the hallway, you were right at the corner where the hallway ends, and it goes into like a hand railing that goes downstairs. But right there in that corner to the left, there's a window. And outside of that window, there are street lights that are shining into the window. You're going to see a definite casting of light coming into and onto the floor. And what I saw was Jason standing right in front of me with his hood on. Now, when I realized it wasn't Jason, I went downstairs. It was ironic because I go downstairs and there's Jason standing with his hood on. Like
Yeah, 'cause
this,
it was wintertime,
because
even though we were inside. So
It's wintertime, and there's no heat on that wing of the building that we were in. So yeah, it is cold. So if you're wondering why Jason had his hood on, that was why. So that was I don't want to say I was shaken. I was more like, I can't believe that I saw that, but I can't believe that that I saw it with my son. And he looked at me for like, hey, did you see that? Like, what was that? What was going on? So that him and I both had the same experience together, was just awesome. It was
Yeah.
absolutely badass. So
And you didn't include all of that there. So it actually started before that moment, because we were all up in
yeah,
the
that's
attic
right.
before that. We were all up in the attic before that.
Hmm.
And it was myself, you, and your wife and your two boys.
And the two youngest, yep, the two boys.
Yeah, we were up in the attic. And then we
Oh
decided to go
yeah.
downstairs, and Maria goes first, and then I
Hmm.
think it's Dorian goes next.
Yep.
I actually go next, but you don't realize this, and
Mm-mm.
then it's you and Keegan.
Yep.
And you think that I'm behind you because you're already
On my
conversing and
shoulder.
thinking I'm
I'm
there
talking to you.
behind you, where I'm actually up near the front of the group. And
Yep.
then when we walk by that room at the top of it's kind of it's the first room in that hallway. Maria and Dorian go into that room,
Yep.
and then they're kind of having a moment, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna let these guys all have their moment. I'm gonna go downstairs. So I go downstairs at that point before you even get there. You think I'm behind you and you're talking to me
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking to you.
when I'm actually
Keegan goes
already
in.
going downstairs.
Yep, Keegan goes into the room, and you and I stop and talk on the outside of the bedroom while I'm talking, you're listening, because that's what we normally do anyway. I'm a
Hmm.
jabberjaw. So, yeah, so I didn't mention that. I didn't mention that you were not coming down the steps behind me. So, for our listeners, this attic stairwell that you're coming out of is very, very narrow.
Yes.
Okay. Very narrow and very steep. So when you're coming out of it, um, yeah, clearly I was coming out of the attic like with you. So you were next to me the whole time when we left the attic. You followed with me, you walked with me, and then when you walked around me, I followed you. I traced you back around to the top of the stairwell where the light was shining in on you. And I thought you were messing with me because you weren't answering. I was expecting to turn my light on to see you with like that smirk that you have on your face right there, because one thing is you knew that we were enjoying ourselves and you weren't trying to like interfere with any of that family time. You were just kind of living in the moment. But boy, you weren't even living in the moment, were you? You weren't even there. So it was
It
cool.
makes me wonder if it would have. Clearly, I was still up there when you first interacted with this thing, because I
Yep.
was, even though I wasn't right next to you, I was still up there in that part of the building. I
Yeah.
wonder if I would have stayed, if it would have stayed as close to us, or as close to you.
Well, that, and what I also wonder is, and I've heard of this happening before, and I've experienced this, um, when there is a presence and there's an occurrence going on. Jason, I never heard you go down the steps. Those steps are not
Yeah.
quiet.
No, I mean, they're not super loud, but they're not quiet.
No, no. But in a dark room, in a quiet house where we were being quiet, specifically, investigating, I pretty sure I would have heard the steps, so
Yeah.
very crazy, very, very crazy, but makes for a good story and makes for a great memory. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming along with us today and listening to our wonderful stories. If you have any stories that you want to share with us or any strange occurrences, please send that to www.strangeparanormal.com. You can give us a call at 913
913.
535 6322. Thank you. And buy our merch. Sorry, dude. My wife started yelling up the hallway.
That's all right. No, that's good.